Hello, my name is Lisa Shea, and today we're going to explore the fun world of Gelli Plate printmaking.
Gelli plates. The idea of Gelli plates is that you make or buy these surfaces, and if you make them, you can make them in any shape at all because it's just gelatin like jello, and you can put it into a mold of any shape that you want to. If you buy them, they come in rectangles or circles or squares. I have an even larger one. So this is the fairly big one. I think it's 8 by 10 or something like that. So you have all sorts of different shapes and sizes you can work with. Let me just put this somewhere. We'll put it over here. And it doesn't matter that they're squishy. They happen to be squishy, but it's not that you're carving into them or pressing into them or anything like that. Their purpose is to serve as a reasonably moist surface on which to paint so that the paint doesn't dry on there. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting paint on there and wanting it to stay wet, and then taking a piece of paper and pressing the piece of paper down onto that wet surface so that it transfers an image. And I've got some of those images around here from last Thursday. There we go. So if I painted a bunch of paint on there so it was all wet, and then I pressed the paper down onto it, then I end up with these kinds of random abstract images. And if I put, let's turn it that way, if I put all the black on one side and then put different colors on another side, then when I press it down that way onto the surface, then this picks up all of that ink and, oh, hold it. You see all the little lines and stuff? So those sorts of paint ripples happen when you lift it up because the paint, I put it on fairly thick for it to cause those kinds of things. And I love those kinds of ripples. But the thought is that you can never tell exactly how this print would work. If you sat there and painted it yourself by hand, you could put the paint exactly in the spots that you wanted and you know exactly what the result is. But when you're painting on this other surface and then you squish it, all those paints can squish and meld and that sort of thing. So it's a much more abstract, relaxing, mindful kind of method of painting. You just go with what it's going to be and you interpret the results, sort of like a Rorschach test. And then when you peel this off, you get some paint on the paper, but there's some paint left behind on here, and then you could do another version and another version, and that's where it gets interesting and relaxing, because you start building this entire series, and the more that you work in the series, the more you start thinking about new ideas about what colors you want to add and so on. My cat is being suspicious as if they're going to come do something. Alright, so I'm going to work with pre-made Gelli plates because I happen to have some. It's cheaper to buy the pre-made Gelli plates than to buy all the gelatin and everything and make them your own. So if you're thinking about having Gelli plates or gelatin plates, it's just cheaper and easier to buy the pre-made ones. Although I understand the appeal of making your own. You can also work with a piece of plastic. I mean, I could do it on this. You could work on a piece of glass. The idea is you want something that the paint is not going to quickly dry on, because you want to be able to paint on this and do your stuff and then put your piece of paper down and peel it off. It turns into a dry object that isn't going to do any transfer of it. Hey Bob, good to see you. So if you want to join along, you just need some acrylic paints and maybe a brush or two and something to paint on that's not going to dry too quickly. So again, you can use plastic or glass, or if you have jelly stuff, you can use the jelly stuff. But if you were to do this kind of painting on regular paper, the paper tends to dry fairly quickly. So I wouldn't recommend trying to paint on paper and then using another piece of paper to lift the transfer off of it. So find, you've probably got a plastic lid or something like that around the house if you want to join us. And if you just want to watch us, then this will be saved as a video, so then you could watch it this round and see what it's like, and then try it yourself at a later date just by replaying the video whenever you want to. And if you want to do something else, then that's fine too. You can do some sketching or drawing or whatever strikes your fancy while I sit here doing jelly plates. But the idea is that normally we have an open paint in the gallery on Saturdays where we hang out and paint and chat. So this way people can hang out and paint and chat from the comfort of their own home. Alright, so what do we got? I'm just looking through my little toolbox of some things that I have. So I have a pencil, not for drawing, but for carving lines in my paints. I've got a little makeup sponge, which is funny because I don't wear makeup, but these are cool for doing artistic stuff. Little wiggles. I have some actual kitchen sponges cut into different shapes. So those are fun to make things out of. And I have, let's just open these up. Oh, which of these can I use? Ladies, what are you up to? Alright, I have some clay molds. This is a B. When you press these down, you're just going to get the outside edge pressed in. So if you have a clay mold, let's see if I find. Here we go. If you have a clay mold that has a lot of indented pieces, that won't work as well because the paint's not going to get into that high middle spot. So if you want to use clay molds or that sort of stuff, you want to use something that's a fairly simple positive versus negative kind of mold where there's just raised parts and indented parts. Are you coming in, Kitty? Well, if you're going to come in, Kitty, it's good that you're coming in before I start the paint process so you don't paint on your little feet. Burp. Yes, burp indeed. This is Felix, and Zuzu is now sitting in my chair, so I am completely surrounded by kitties curious what I'm doing. Right, kitties? That is all right. Well, welcome. We've got 6 people watching now. You guys can chime in with comments and say who you are and what you're up to, or if you don't want to, that's fine too. You do not need to. Alright, got brushes. We've got a reasonably good brush. Oh, where are you guys off to? Little bouncy kitties. And we got paints. So as we have seen before, I like black. That's just the way I am. Alright, so we got some black paint. We got some, we'll call that turquoise. It's actually turquoise. Ha! We got some turquoise paint. So this is cheap. Probably got it in bulk packs. So cheap acrylic paint. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or special. Oh, this is even a sealed closed black. Come on. Open up the black paint. Kitties, what are you eating out there? Alright. Get a little black paint. Oops. See, look, I'm gonna get my whole desk messy. That's alright. You know, I did think about putting a protective cover down on my desk, and then I said, nah. I'll just deal with it later. Now, of course, I say that as I'm about to get blue paint all over creation. Come on. I think it's stuck, and I'm sort of worried that it's gonna like pressure and then release everything all over my desk. Come on. We got a little blue plug of paint. There it goes. See, it's exactly what I knew it was going to do. But fortunately, it is all okay. Always close the lids of your paints so that they not create these hard wedges. Oh, see, it's not closing. Peel off the little hard edges in here. Alright, well, I'll deal with that later. Blue paint. Oh, and have some paper towels around so that when your fingers get covered with paint, you can get it back off again. Alright, I like working with my circle because circles are fun. So I'm going to put my other thing to the side. I suppose where my jelly plate might go. I will put this over to the side so people who come on know what we're up to. We're jelly print making. Alright, so this is the surface that I'm painting on. I know it looks small. I enjoy it. So we're going to start with the very first one. And again, you can do a specific design if you want to, but you have to keep in mind that if I sat here and painted this really detailed little, I don't know, mandala or something, first off, by the time I finished painting it, it would probably dry, and then I wouldn't be able to actually transfer it off of the piece of paper. So you need to work fairly quickly. And then second off, even if I got it painted super fast and was able to put the piece of paper down before it dried, the act of putting the paper down is going to squish the paint and it's going to end up being messy. So it'll be an interpretation of what I paint, but it will never, or rarely, be exactly what you're able to do with your intentions. So what shall we do? You could use the whole surface if you want, or you could just use a part of the surface. So if I paint all the way around to the edges, I will end up getting a nice circle shape, which makes me happy. So if you guys are painting stuff, you can tell us, you could post pictures of what you've painted. I don't think you can post them in this chat, but you should be able to say I posted it on my Facebook page, and then with a different browser, so I don't lose this browser, I should be able to go to a different browser and see what you've been working on, so we can share pictures with each other and what we're up to. Or if you don't want to share your pictures and just do it privately, that's fine too. Alright. But see, I have to go quickly because it's going to think about drying if I go too slowly, and then that'll foil the purpose of this. Right, so anywhere that has no paint or that has dried paint is going to end up being blank, we'll say, in the final print. So if I leave holes in there, those will end up blank. And if any of this paint dries because I'm moving too slowly, then those will also end up blank. Only wet paint will transfer. And the thicker you make it, the more you'll get those, what I consider cool, ridges and textures because of it pressing down. Alright, so now we've got that. Now we pull out the paper. Put this here. Comment that this is so much easier when I actually have two hands to work with. When I was doing this last time, I was having to try to rip paper with my teeth. Get some paper. My friend Debbie Gardner gave me bunches of different kinds of colored and textured papers, which are fun for this, but you can use, watercolor paper or acrylic paper or whatever you want to. Alright, so that's wet paint on a surface which is helping it not dry too quickly, but I already see some spots that are drying. Now we got a piece of paper. We're going to put it down flat, and then we're going to press it down. You could roll it down too with a roller if you want to, but there's no harm in just pressing it, because your only purpose really is to get that wet paint to stick to the underside of the paper. And then we're going to pull this off. Alright. So see how it's got those wiggly lines in it? The texture lines. Carol Frieswick has done these and gotten them into art shows. Not like this particular design, but the abstract idea in general. So they're a way to fairly quickly make designs. Now, so that's number one. Now, there's still wet paint on there. So if we just left that exact wet paint, made a second version. So I'm just pushing it down so that the paint transfers. Alright, so now we get something that's related to this first version. And if we turn this around, we'd figure out maybe like that. That could be, we have to figure that out. But in any case, the two versions here are related to each other. Hey Julie, good to see you. So we've got the first version and the second version, which are similar to each other. Oh, I think they go like this. Similar to each other, but not exactly the same, because the first one pulled off paint and the second one had, yeah, see where the holes are? The second one went with whatever paint was left. At some point, there's not going to be any paint left, and the paint will, you can see that's drying right in there, so that's not a spot that will transfer anymore. But we have more paint. So now we could sit here and do some additional things. Say, what if it had like that? And what if we had blue in the middle? And I don't know, little blue spots on the edges. Another piece of paper. And smooth that down. Ooh, see, I'm liking that. And some people might be doing this with greens and browns and really like greens and browns. But kitty down. Good kitty. So when I was doing this on Tuesday, I started with blacks and whites, and then I tried putting in greens and browns to make landscapes, and I'm not drawn to greens and browns for whatever reason. I like blacks and blues and purples. So I'm saying you don't use the colors I'm using just because I really like these colors. There could be other colors that you like and other shapes that you like. See, I like these sort of mysterious blobby circle things. And I really like the little balls rolling around like they're electrons. And this is some sort of a new mysterious creation in physics. Alright, so we'll put that down. And now that stuff is really starting to dry. So like these areas here are completely dry, would not transfer. Those are left, but I think it would be a little sparse for my taste if we just did that pull. So we're going to add some more paint. And what happens as you start working on this is that you start coming up with new ideas and say, oh, well, I like that, but what if I did this? And you fall into a rhythm. And you try something and then try something else. And it ends up being very soothing because, I mean, I had no idea that that was going to happen. I had a general idea that it was going to be black and blue since I'm using black and blue colors. But I didn't know exactly what the result would be because you never really know with these kinds of process. And you just trust and let it do what it's going to do. What if I, instead of making those dots, I made those longer lines? And again, I like doing it thick because I like the ridges, but if you're not as fond of the ridges, you can do it thinner. You're just going to be, you have to move more quickly because the thinner it is, the more quickly it's going to dry. And once it dries, it stops transferring. Alright, so we'll do a little of that. Oh, you're a hard lump, is that what you are? A little of that. Alright, so we say, well, what if we try that? And we're pressing down to transfer the paint onto our piece of paper. What is my phone doing? Hopefully nothing too exciting. We do not know. Alright, so now we have this one. And that one actually looks like it has, to me, that's a person there. That's their head and that's their little arm sticking out, and then they've got another arm back there. Yeah, so now it's starting looking like people. People and like horses, or yeah, some sort of horse creatures looking in on either side. If we did it like that, do you see the two black horses on either side? Right, well, I see strange shapes and things. I accept that. So I like this a lot, but I get a very different feel from this one than I even do from the previous one, which had like atoms spinning kinds of feelings to me. And from this one, which was more just generic shapes. The first two I didn't get much of a connection with, but then that one I really like because of the spinning circles feel. And this one I like because of the more people and animals feel that I'm getting from it. But in essence, they're all the exact same starting point, just making changes along the way as I'm thinking up new ideas to do with it. And part of the impression comes from this textured paper that I'm using, but I've got a whole bunch of other papers over here. So let me find one. Brown paper. Alright, I have a piece of brown paper that I'm going to cut up. Which a couple of shapes. Hey Laura, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's a fairly calm, relaxing way to make art that hopefully has little stress involved because you can't control the result. You have to relinquish control and just accept what it's going to do. And if something doesn't come out the way you like, it doesn't really matter because you can make another 20 of them in fairly short order. So you know, you make the first two and say, oh, I sort of like the colors, but the shapes aren't inspiring me very much. And you say, all right, well, what if I try this? And you say, oh, well, that's sort of cool. So now I've got a piece of brown paper, and I'll just put it right down without even adding any more paint. And since I took a little while to cut paper into shapes, this dried a little, so there could be some empty spots from where the paint is not going to transfer. So this is related to, this was the previous one. So I did that one, and then this one, in the exact same layout without making any changes at all to it. And you can see where the shapes, like that circle part is there, and that part is there. But then this section must have dried, and that area around there must have dried, so that the paint did not transfer as thickly. But also the brown paper has an impact on it, so now it's got a different kind of feel to it with the colors on the brown versus the colors on the, we'll call that sort of a gray-white over there with speckles. So you could try different kinds of paper. And see, this even has like a softer feel to it as it's getting, as the paint was drying. So now the paint here is getting drier. Let me find another color to add to this mix to show how these things can evolve. So where did I put my paints? So there they are. Alright, so I'm going to look for a bit purple. Ultramarine blue. Blue purple? No, it's also cleaning to be a blue. Seems to be out of purple. Oh wait, you purple? Haha! I found purple. Alright, so I'm going to add some purple. Kitties. purple. What shall we do with purple? I've been doing symmetrical things. Let's do something asymmetrical. Well, I mean, not that my shapes are entirely symmetrical, but I had been doing a sort of symmetrical pattern on these. And we're just gonna make some blues. Oh, I think that's a blue lumpy bit. Let me try to get the lumpy bit out without getting my fingers all painty. There we go. I think that was the dried cap from the paint. Alright, yeah, we'll go with this whole yin-yang thing where half of it is one thing and half of it's the other. I'm painting along the edge because I want to define the edge of this circle, but you don't have to go along the edge of your shape. You can just paint in the center and leave the edges clear. Alright, so I'm not painting that fully in, so there's some gaps. I'll put some black splotches in there. A little bit of blue splotches. And then also what I'm going to do, and maybe I won't use the pencil this time because I think the pencil gets confusing thinking that I'm drawing when I'm not drawing. But instead, I'm sure I have a credit card in here somewhere. Oh, here we go. I get all these 25% off things from Uno's, which are sort of cardy. So then you can use a card or something to make lines in the paint surface. So those are just random lines. Now I've drawn lines, but we'll see if they actually come out being lines. Hey Marcia! If they end up being lines or not lines in the final product. Alright, so our Gelli plate has paint on it. Some places are now dry, so that won't transfer. Other places are wet, so that will transfer. We got a blank piece of paper. We'll press it down. Gently press to transfer the paint onto the surface. And again, if you have a rolly thing, which I guess I don't have mine with me, you could roll it evenly if that's really important to you, but it's going to squish anyway, so it's not like you're going to get a exact transfer of the paint onto your paper. So I figure you might as well peel it up. Alright, so then that's the shape there. You can see the purple area with the black and blue, but you don't get much of a sense of the lines that I carved because they filled in when I pressed it. So you need to carve fairly wide lines in order for them not to fill in when you're pressing down. And then you could also see that even though this was the previous version that we did, that the top area has pretty much all dried up. So there's a little hint still of what the previous design had been. And you could see where the matches are, like this blue on the right, and then this blue shape in the top area. But a lot of the previous design is now drying, and we've got our new design. So this is sort of like a transitional piece that goes between the previous series and this new series that we're working on. But I could still just keep painting with blue and black and keep making the series go. Once you start adding new colors, then it's more clearly taking a new direction there. But I like how this part is thick and full with a little bit of detail, and that part is soft and fuzzy because so I like the two different aspects of the color there. So we'll move that over there, move that over there. Alright, what do we want to try next? So we've got these shapes. So we got a bumblebee. So I'll try this. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but that's part of what the experiment is. Kitty, you're going to get your little paws all painty. Yeah, no, I don't think that. Yeah, go that way. Good kitten. Morning, Marcia. Good to see you. Alright, so Cat managed to get out without getting their paws all full of paint, which is a good thing, because that could have been sad. Alright, so I'm going to try painting just the top surfaces of the bee. Now only the top surfaces should transfer, because the indents won't transfer down into the paper. I know. Oh, alright. So this could work or it could not work as part of the experimentation. Oh, no, the fact that I slid it is probably not good. Oh, that actually looks sort of bee-like. Right, so now the question is, well, first I have to get the extra paint off my fingers so I don't get paint all over everything. So now the question is, how carefully can I place my piece of paper down on that to actually get the bee shape to transfer? Alright, so we'll put this down softly. But see, now I have an expectation of what I'm trying to do. So now I could be disappointed if it doesn't work. So just be aware, if you try to do something specific, it might not work. And you have to be okay with that. Which I suppose is true for pretty much all of life. You can't control things in life. Control is an illusion. Oh, look, look, look! So it actually did make a little bee-like shape there. I don't know if you can quite see, but it's got a head and it's got the two wings and then the little stripes. This was my first one, but I slid a little. So that's more of an abstract, maybe a strange seal. You see the eyes and the mouth down there and its flippers? Alright, so now this shape is related to this shape, which was the previous shape. But you can see that the paint is drying, so we're getting even less of the splotches in the top. And even down here it's starting to dry and peel away. So while I appreciate the concept of the more specific shapes in there, to me that takes away from it. Although I suppose if you put like the bee in the middle and then did some stuff around it, maybe that could be interesting. But I prefer to have the more organic shapes. I would have liked this overall better if it didn't have the bee stuff in it, I think. So we could say, let's put that down there for a second. So what if we took, hey kitty, kitty, I know you want to come participate, but this is all inky. So if we fill in the bee, and just put some little splotches. And as I'm saying, we don't need to have exact figures. I'm going to try this credit card thing again, and we'll make a line up the middle. See what happens. All right, making a thicker spot up the middle. All right, let's try that. And then we press down to transfer the paint onto the paper. And repeat. Ooh. I like that. So you can see that our carving down the center of the black area did make an open space. And I like the lines that it created there. And almost make it look like the top of a flower or something. Well, I guess top of the flower is not quite the idea I'm thinking of. Like the base of an onion? You know, something where you've got a solid part that tendrils are coming out of. Oh, like a jellyfish. Yeah, so it's sort of like a jellyfish. And I really like this bottom area. I like the colors swirling in there. I like the hint of the circle. And I like the open spots. So I like everything about that. Although I suppose the black is a little on the heavy side. So let's see if we move that over there, move that over there. What would be different about that? Well, I suppose one way is to carve out more space. Alright, so now we've got some of the black carved away. We haven't done anything else to it. Let's see what that does. Ooh, intriguing. So it's sort of like the idea of when you draw crayons all over something to make a base and then paint it over with black acrylic and then scratch through the acrylic. You know, those kinds of things that we did in elementary school. So it's sort of coming up with the same idea because we scrape through the black, but then there's still a hint of the previous colors on there. You can see a little blue and purple coming through. So I like the way the two sections are separated. I really like the colors of the blue and purple and how they're all merging together and that hint of the circle. And I like the black much better in this with the space in it versus this other one that we had previously where the black was a very solid block. Although I like the textures in there, but I didn't like it just being so thick and solid. So I like this with lines in it, but it would have been neat if I still had enough paint on there for it to make all of those nice wiggly texture lines that I'm so fond of. So apparently what I want is I want something with thick texture lines, but also with these carved out lines in it. So let's see, but now we're also losing the blue. Well, maybe if I work quickly, I can make thick black texture lines and still have some of that blue left. So I don't quite want to add more paint to it yet. But I also like the half and half kind of feel that I'm getting here. Well, let's just try that. What is this going to do? And I'm just using little squares of paper to make this easier so that everything doesn't hit everything else. But you can of course use full sizes pieces of paper if you prefer doing that and like the look of that framed. It is up to you. Alright, so the blue faded away and the black I put too much on or didn't leave enough spaces, so I lost my lines and I ended up just with these circle things. So that's sort of interesting. That actually looks like a swimming fish to me, like you're looking top down on a fish and those are its little fins. And back there. And I like the curve of just the line on the bottom, but I'd like to have more paint in there, but we are running out of paint, or it's drying is what's happening. Okie dokie. Alright, so now we're coming down to having the black left, but we're losing the blue, which had been the previous set of, from here, the purple and blue, in terms of our series progression. Alright, so we'll put that there. Alright, so what other color should we have? We've got black. The purple and blue are pretty much dried and gone, so what else should we go with black? I'm a fan of black and white. Although we have this... Oh, what should we do? Now we'll go with white. Do this without getting it all over myself. So when I did this on Tuesday, I managed to squirt it and it poofed up and got it all over my shirt. So now I'm trying to be a little more cautious about how I squeeze paint out of tubes. Alright, so we got black on there, which is drying, which is in a vertical shape. So let's try getting a different brush. Oh, well here, let's try something else. Let's try our little squishy tool. Now again, if I try to do that and think it's actually going to come up with little lines, that's probably not going to happen because it's all going to squish. But there could be little gaps in there. So don't get too fond of those little lines, I guess is what I'm saying. They're actually going to come out that way in the end result. Wonder if I can tell batteries left on my phone. Apparently not. So I have no idea how my phone is doing in terms of battery. But we'll find out if it lasts the 3 hours. Or if it doesn't, then I will switch over to something else. So if you see me suddenly vanish, you'll know that it's some sort of a battery challenge that I'm facing. Alright, so we got black and white. We'll switch to see what other paper colors I have here. How about that one? Alright, so I'm going with, this is a different kind of brown than that other one. Sort of a cooler brown. Alright, so we got our piece of paper, we've got our black and white. Let's see what it does. Gently press down to transfer all the acrylic paint onto our paper. Peel it up. Alright, so the black part is drying, but the white part, and you can see that you didn't get many of the lines, but that's actually sort of neat that you've got one area that has the text and then another area that you can still see down through it to the previous layer, which is the blue purple layer. There's little bits of blue and purple in there that connect it to the previous series. But this was the previous one in here. So it went from this, where the blue was just about drying fully, to this, where the black is starting to fade, but we've got our white now that we just added in as our next layer. So I actually like this a lot. Kitten, please don't step on the keyboard. I don't want you typing things. Good kitten. Kitten, I don't want you to jump that way either. Yeah, go down. Good kitty. Yep, go down and then up. Alright, sorry. Cat is threatening to leave little paint footprints all over the paw prints all over the house. So you've got the white that we just added on and the thicker texture from the thicker paint, and then we have the black which was left from the previous run, and you can see how it's getting soft and a little faded because the paint is drying. But there is still some texture in that. It's just got smaller textures, so that is pretty neat. And I like the way the black is reaching down into the white and the white is echoing the black. So I like the whole yin-yang opposite impact of that. Let's see, wherever we put that, it's going to start. We're going to have to relocate some of the previous ones now. Put these off camera so that they can dry. Alright, so what should we do to this now? Well, we got this purple over here. Add some purple in the middle. Around the edge. Like that. So Marcia and Laura, are you guys painting anything? Or are you just hanging out having coffee or something? Or is this just running in the background while you do other stuff? Alright, so we're transferring the paint. Peeling up. Oh, ho, 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 ho. So look at that. It looks like people on the top. Like the center purple figure is a woman who has her head bent to that direction, which is left on my screen. And that there's other figures there. Sort of like underneath a circle of the sky. And the bottom almost looks like birds to me. Like doves or something flying up. So on one hand I like that. On the other hand it's strange that the doves are flying up from the ground and that the people are huddled under that on the top. For some reason I would think it would work better if they were reversed. But then it doesn't have that feel when you turn it upside down. Now the top area doesn't look like birds and the bottom area doesn't look like people. Alright, so I like it like that. Alright, so if I like the people on the top, of course they're not going to look like people when I do the next pull if I'm trying to do something like that. But alright, we'll just have to think quick before the paint dries. I would want grass. Yeah, let's go with grass. Alright, so need to get some green before this dries. Green. Alright, got some green. Alright, got some green. Thing. Alright, people with grass. Alright, and then we'll go with a few little purple flowers. See what happens when you start trying to do this though, is it rarely comes out the way you think it's going to come out. But there's no harm in trying. Might not come out the way you think, but might come out in an interesting way nonetheless. Alright, so my theory here is that I'm going to get people on the top and a field of flowers on the bottom. So we'll see how it's putting the paper down. Pressing the paper. Peeling the paper. Alright, interesting. Alright, the top things could still be people, although I don't know about the hair flying in the air of that person in the center. That used to look like a nice woman bending over. And there's nothing to say. We've got a paintbrush here. Now you can't take a little paint and try to alter your image. Now, of course, do you make it better or worse? Alright, now she's got super bushy hair. That sort of looks like a person. Person with an alien clinging to her back. Now it's sort of like a person carrying a baby on her back, walking along a hill with mountains in the background. Alright, I can go with that. Interesting. But now that no longer exactly matches that. But then you could say, if we move this out of the way, kitten. Yes, you're a good kitten. So now we could say, what if we got the paint off our fingers so we don't make anything. I was just trying to move that so it's a little clearer and not quite in that bright spot, but I think that even makes it worse where I moved it. I suppose we can lift the light, see if that helps. Although I think that bright spot's coming from the ceiling light and not from the desk light. But alright, so what I was saying is if I actually paint her back in directly, let's see, now can I actually get the same feel that the abstract auto thing did? Now see, now that looks more like a worm from Dune rising up to attack people, which is not quite what my intention had been. Let's try. Try that. Try putting the paper down. Let's see what happens. Intriguing. Alright, so the person I tried to make into a person clearly looks far less like a person and more like a Cthulhu monster with tentacles coming out of their head. So in that sense, my attempt was not quite what I thought it was going to be. But the design as a whole is an interesting one. Now I don't like the way the white is showing through, and I didn't add white to it. What I was doing was peeling off the green and revealing the white that was underneath. So that's also an interesting aspect of this as you're building layers of paint. So you see the previous layer, it just showed the green because the white was on a lower layer that I had painted over. And now we're getting down to that lower layer of white that used to be there in the previous ones. Alright, Cthulhu monster with tentacles. Move this other blue one somewhere else. How about up there? Alright, so we still got the purple and black on the top, and then we've got this green and white on the bottom. And welcome to the new people who have joined us. We're doing a casual Saturday open paint. I suppose we're at the hour mark, so it's now 11. I'm going to be going from 11 to 1. I'll do jelly plates for another hour, and then I will switch over to some string art. You're welcome to join me if you have acrylic paints. Not like physically join me, I mean virtually join me from your home, painting along with just regular acrylic paints and brushes. You don't need to paint on a jelly print surface like I am. You can paint on anything that won't absorb the paint, so you can paint on plastic or glass or anything like that. The idea is that you don't want this to dry before you get a chance to press down your paper onto it. So if you paint it on paper, for example, it would probably dry pretty quickly. Although not too quickly, because I mean we did that a little while ago and that's still wet over there. Sorts of different things to use the paint, so brushes, uh, fake credit cards from Uno's. Alright, so let's try putting a little more. So the general idea is that you can make a little change to it, see what happens, make a little more change, do another one. So we'll press this down. Interesting. Alright, I'm not really keen on the large blocky dots. I like it much better when it did this kind of thing with the thin line. So apparently I like the thin line effect, but I'm not fond of the large blocky dot effect. But on the other hand, I still like this sense of people walking along in a line. Her Cthulhu face has gotten a little less tentacly looking and is more looking like a face in there. And I'm not keen that it makes this mountaintop effect with the green. I'd rather have it be a more solid, but I like all of the textures and the holes and the different colors down here. Well, thank you, Marcia. So, alright, well, now that we know that we've got this, let me move this one out of the way. Put that over there. Alright, so this is where we currently are. That one there with the dots. Alright, so if I'm not liking the dot stuff, we'll take some, let's take some blue. You know, sky, blue. Oh, I think this blue paint's sort of drying. Let's add a little more blue paint. You can do this without, I think this is one, yeah, this is one that's a little dangerous and could possibly splurt. There we go. Alright, get some blue paint. Put the paint over there. Alright, so we'll get some blue. Blue sky cliche. Get those black dots a little less dotty. Just paint a ridge. Goes down to the edge. Alright, and so we're working from that one. I didn't like the gaps between the top and the bottom, so we'll get some green. We'll make sure that we fill in. Where are we going? Fill in the connection between the two. Which is interesting, because in these other ones I like that there wasn't a connection, that they were two different worlds. But in this one, maybe because it's looking more like actual people walking along an actual ridge, it bothers me more that they aren't touching. So it shows how your expectations end up impacting these. Alright, so now we got a blue sky, we got a ridge that they're walking along, and let's fill in the bit of splotchiness down here for the green bottoms. There we go. But I'm not painting it fully because I like it having those holes show through. And we'll put some white down there. Alright. It's a little bright, so we'll squash that out with a little more green. There we go. Now at this point I could have taken so long that the Ryan won't come through. So that's part of why you have to sort of work quickly and just accept what you're doing. Alright, let's see. So we have no idea how this will come out, but it will be interesting. And alright, so yes, the top area is getting fairly dry. So now it just looks like mountains more than it looks like people. And I'm not keen on those two giant white spots there. But like I said, we have the technology. If we really didn't like them, we can change them. We no longer have two giant white spots up there. Right, but I do like the textures down here. I am not keen, after saying I didn't like the spots, I'm also not keen on this solid thick ring on the top. It looks a little too artificial. Alright, but you know, when you're going through this process, you get some that you say, oh, that's really cool, and then you get some that say, alright, it's not quite what I would want. Then you look at it and you say, alright, what could I do now? Alright, if I don't like the fact that it's a semi-thin ring, then we'll just fill in the rest of it. So it no longer has this ring effect. Alright, so now we no longer have a ring around the edge. We just have a solid top. Or not a solid top, but a semi-solid top. Alright. Black figure in the middle. I seem to like figures. Little purple figures on the side. Alright, I'm liking that. Alright, I didn't like the giant white splotches. Cover up giant white splotches. So they are now green. But this whole field of green thing is a little... Oh, what if we put a little stream? See, now I'm trying to get representational, which is always dangerous path to head down when you're doing these, because you have no idea if it's actually going to work the way you think it's going to work. But let's try a blue stream coming down this hill. We have no idea if this is going to work or not, but it could. One never knows. There we go. Blue stream. Put a little cloud in the sky. Right, that's a little bright. Take a little blue. Cover up our bright cloud in the sky. Here's the beauty of doing this. Alright, let's try that. What will this look like? Oh wait, I need to get some fresh paper. Oh, this is going to dry while I'm getting my paper. Alright, we're going to go with the cream color paper. Got our paper. Let's see how this works. Peel. Ooh. Alright, well our stream sort of vanished and it turned into like a little lake at the bottom. But I like everything about this. I like the person at the top and the little figures. I like the textures of the sky. I like the textures of the ground. Alright, so we put this over here. Say that's where we are right now. What if we just tried doing another one? So we haven't done anything at all to this from this previous one. We've just put another piece of paper right down because there was plenty of paint, but it will never be the exact same image. Some of the paint, and now we're going to get to under layers of paint. And some of the paint is drying. Ho, 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 ho. So those are related to each other. But you can see how this one's now, the green is getting lifted up and we're getting down to the purple underlayer from the previous runs. And how this is drying, so now we're getting more of a patchwork effect. Interesting. Oh, where can I put this? There we go. There we go. I'm just pausing to think for a minute. And have some of my protein shake. Alright, so I'm not keen on this giant blue blob over here now, because I really like the rest of this figuring work, but that giant block of blue there can be removed with a credit card. Ha 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 ha. Look at that. Blue is gone. Alright, so now we've got green here, but then we've got these giant patches of holes. What if we carve out some more holes? And then put a little green back into that spot. Alright, what does that do? So you always have a general amount of control. You can take away paint, you can add in paint. Right, that actually looks sort of threatening to me. Wasn't quite what I intended, but I see an eyeball there, sort of a furrowed brow, and then like angry teeth. Right, is it just me? What if we turn it a different way? No, those lines still seem like angry lines, and now it looks like it has two eye things up there. Alright, I have somehow made an angry thing, and I think it's because of those lines. Those lines make it seem angry to me. Interesting. But I like those thin edges on them. So that part makes me happy, and I love the colored textures in here, the purple, black, blue all melding together. So I like the colors, and I like the green and blue melding in there together. But I don't like those lines. And I suppose one could say that I could then just paint over them, but I have a feeling if I tried to paint these, that it would just end up being... Well, no, it says actually... I think I need to pull that eye out there. Alright, so now it has a whole different feel to me, now that those lines are gone. Now it's a much gentler feel. Alright, so you always have control over your results. If you think something would be better if you did one thing or another thing to it, it is yours to master. Put that up there. Put this over here. Alright, I'm going to sit down for a second because I've been standing up. Alright, what should I do next? Well, not really a figure making person, but let's try one just to see. All right, we'll do something simple, like a flower. Do little petally things. Looks more like a saguaro cactus, but that's okay. All right, we'll give it a purple flower top. Purple blue flower top. White center, although not bright white because they don't seem to like that, so a mixed center. Alright, what do we think of that? You guys are all saying Lisa needs to learn how to paint a little better, which I do not disagree with, but you know, it's all practice. And that's what we're doing here, right? We're having fun and practicing. Alright, so we got sort of a flowery shape. See what happens when I squash it. It'll turn into a demon of darkness. Maybe there's only one way to find out. Oh look. Actually looks sort of flowery. So just by resting for that short period of time, we lost all of the surrounding material because it dried. So all of this stuff here is now dry and is not transferring anymore. I mean, a little bit of it that we got some of this stuff around the edges, but the primary shape that we got was this new one that we painted. And you can see that the stem and stuff that I painted squashed when I pressed it down because of the thick paint. So I would have to paint a thinner design to get it to transfer more directly, more accurately, but then it would also dry more quickly. And you also get to the point where if you're trying to get something incredibly accurate, you might as well just paint right on the paper itself instead of doing this transfer method. Part of the transfer method is because you get these unusual things that you hadn't quite intended. But alright, so let's say that you're liking this. Alright, I'll put that up over there. There we go. Alright, now what could we do? Well, if we said we want it not to have all this extra stuff here, we'll use our credit card to carve away the extra paint. Alright, so now it's more flower shaped. And how about the top? Reasonably flower shaped. I suppose you could say that that was a little bowed out. It needs to be a little more carved in. Let's try that. And you know what? Because feeling a little whimsical, let's put a few little floating things. But it's starting to look a little too symmetrical. I guess I just have symmetry stuck in my mind. How about that? And we'll see what happens. Paper. Thank you again to Debbie Gardner for donating all this paper to the project. Sorry. Ho 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 ho! So if we compare that to the previous version, that's actually sort of cool looking. It almost looks like a flower. With, you know, little extra lines and stuff that were left over from previous times, and I actually like those little dots of fairy stuff that are happening in the background that I added, the little white dots up there. So I'm reasonably pleased with this. See, now, if I get too pleased with this and think I can do it again, then that is where it doesn't quite work out properly. But, heck. Let's see if I put that over there. Is there enough ink on there that I could do it again? Well, let's find out. So this was the one that we just did. And it looks like there might be enough ink left on there to get a similar print, but it's never going to be exactly the same. So let's see what this comes out with. Intriguing. So now we're getting past the green layer and we're getting back down into the purple layer. See how there's some little purple and blue bits there that were left over from the previous runs? From that run over there where we had the green grass and stuff. So the previous layers speak out, and even here in the white we're starting to pick up a little bit of the blue and purple that used to be there underneath in the sky. So you still get these ghosts of what you previously did. So I like that. I like the little spots. I like the flower. Alright. Let's put that there. Alright. So I have a feeling if I just put another piece of paper down, we're just going to get a little abstract. Let's do it. I'm torn between adding more paint to it and just finding out, but I have a feeling that it's, excuse me, so dry at this point that we're going to get very little up off of it. But this is how you learn. You see what happens. Yeah, so at this point the paint is pretty much dry. And we just get this little hint of what the flower was. But if you put these three up as a series, where you showed this one here on the ground first with the full image, and then we showed this one second as a middle image, and then this one is a fading image, that could actually be a pretty cool series. You know, one of the shows we have with the Blackstone Valley Art Association is a series show. And that would be pretty neat. Or even to hang as a triptych on your wall to show the three different versions. And this one now almost looks like a person to me, that's looking that way, and then the hint of their body as they're standing there. So it's sort of like a transition between the flower to the essence of it, which is a person. So I like that. And if you look just at this one, you might not realize that it had once been a flower, but if you had the three of them all hanging next to each other, then you would see how that connection was all happening. Alright, so I am pleased with that. And while we're looking at this Gelli plate, if we just looked at it, we might think, oh, we could put something down on that and we would get an image, because, you know, you see white splotches and all this other stuff. But all of that is now dry, as we proved when we did this press. So it's good to be aware of the state of the Gelli plate to know what it's going to do. All right, I'm just looking for a place to put this one. Alright, we got it. Alright, so on one hand, we now have a completely blank slate to work with, in the sense that this is all dry. Well, my fingers are dirty, so I can't prove it that way. But it is dry, it's not coming up at all. Put wet paint down on this, there's a chance the wet paint could connect to this dried stuff, and the dried stuff would come up anyway, which you could say is a bad thing, and that maybe you should rinse this off. Or you could say that this is a fine thing, and that you want to be able to keep the essence of the series going. So if you get some pickups of the different colors, it could be interesting. So what do we want to do? Let's try making the entire thing white. And since I want to do a big swap, I'll use this sponge thing. And you don't have to use makeup sponges if you don't want to. I mean, here's somewhere under here. We got regular household sponges. And I happen to cut it up into a heart shape. But you could just use it as a sponge and not as a shaper. So we'll just put some paint. I'm trying not to get it on the desk, which is probably a fruitless attempt. Anyway, I really like those little splotchy things that I made. You can see that's part of it. When I started all of the things, and in fact with that black one I didn't like the splotchy things, but I probably didn't like them because they were in an even ring around the top. I like these because they were sort of like little fairy dots dancing in the breeze. That's it. I could quote poetry to you guys while I'm doing this. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not mind me stopping here, or is it he will not see me stopping here? I think it might be he will not see me stopping here. So it's more of a furtive feel to watch it. But of course it's spring now, so I shouldn't be talking about snow stuff. Alright, so we got a little white, and those holes that are poking through look like they're purple, but they're actually going to just be paper colored because that purple is dry purple, which isn't going to transfer. Go with this purple, speaking of purple. What are we doing? Now I was thinking I was just going to do an abstract design, because I'm doing this all with a heart-shaped sponge, so now I'm starting to think heart ideas, which is what happens. You get inspired by things. Alright, so what color should the heart be? Oh, make it purple. How about black? Black heart. Now, of course, I say I'm going to make a heart, but see if I can actually get it to look heart-like. Look reasonably heart-like to you? Or is it more like a butterfly or something? Alright, well, we'll try it. It could work, it could not work. So we'll put our piece of paper down. Push gently, but reasonably firmly down onto the surface. Alright, peel it. Oh ho 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 ho! And you can see that there's little bits of blue in there. That's because my palette over here, as you can see in the corner, is not completely segmented. I like having the colors all have little hints of other colors in there. So I like those little hints of blue. I like the way that the white and purple came together, and that it's a circle shape, but it doesn't have super hard edges. I'm very pleased with that. Alright, so then, can I make another one? Can I be greedy? What happens if I just press down more paper onto this spot? Alright, so let's put this over here to dry. Is that going to stay or is it going to slide down? Alright, it's going to stay. Put the there. Alright, need more paper. What other color paper could I use? What do we have in here? Ooh, was that a warmer one? How about this? No, that's too brown. I'll go with this. It's just a white. Alright, we're going to go with more of a bright white kind. Most of these other ones have been speckled browns and greens and things. But this is a different set. Well, it's still a Simpson paper, which is a craft paper line, so it's not just like drawing paper or something like that. It's clearly a whiter color. I tend to like these speckled kinds of papers to give it a little bit of texture. But you can use any paper you want. You can just use regular printer copy paper if that's what you've got. Alright. That's pretty neat. You still get the shape of it, but you'll notice that I did not add any more paint at all to this. But now we're getting green down here because we're getting through the purple white layer that I put down and down to the green that was underneath. So even though it was pretty dry back when we were doing the flowers, like the flower over here had just a little hint of green, that hint of green coming through here in this next level. So if you really didn't want that, that would be an excuse for, a reason for clearing off your Gelli plate or whatever your surface you're painting on in between runs, so you didn't get that showing through. But I like that. I like the hint of what we were working on before coming through in here in this new version. Part of it depends if you're working in the same color set. If you completely switched color sets and didn't want any of the old colors showing through, and then that would be a good reason to thoroughly clean off your surface before you started the next one. But in general, I like that. I like the textures a lot. And it still looks like it's wet, so hey, let's do another one. Let's see what happens. I'm just trying to figure out where to put this. Put that down there. Put that over. No. Over there. Another piece of paper on our purple heart. Or I suppose it's a black heart. There we go. Peel this up. Alright, so now the paint is drying and we've lifted off a lot of the paint. So where before it had the solid black, now you can see that we are fading. We are getting spots where it's completely dry, and then we're getting spots where now we're showing through from the green, which had been dried before, but which is getting reactivated with the paint touching on it. So that is pretty cool. So I like this, and again, this would be a cool series if you started with the full heart, that one, and then we came to the partial heart, this one over here, which you actually can't see because I tucked it too far. Right, so partial heart over there, and then this one here. So you can see how they went from one to the other, and in this series I did not add any extra paint in between. I just kept pulling off of the same initial set that was there. So I like the first and second one. This third one is getting fairly abstract, but it's still interesting. I like the colors and the shapes of it. Alright, so we'll pull this out of here. Put that down. Put this over here somewhere. There we go. the entire area around me that you can't see is now completely layered with drying prints, which is part of the fun. So I'll have to make these into greeting cards for all my family and friends. So if you guys start getting cards sent to you that look like these, you'll know where they came from, because it would be a shame to waste all of these interesting things we have created. Or if any of you guys would like any of these, just let me know and I'll set them aside and bring them once we can ever meet in person again. Bring them to one of our meetings, or I could put one in the mail. Mail still works. For now, can you imagine if they shut down our mail? We're unable to mail things to each other. I have to start hermetically sealing mailboxes so that the poor mail people, you know, at least we don't lick stamps anymore. The stamps are all self-stick, or at least the ones that I use are all self-stick. And my envelopes are self-seal. You pull the plastic thing off and they seal. But you're still handling it with your hands. So if you were sick and then you put a bunch of envelopes into the mail system, I guess mail people will have to use gloves all the time so they don't touch the envelopes. But hopefully we develop a vaccine reasonably soon, and then life can return to having some social direct aspect to it. But it's fun to do this stuff virtually with you guys. Certainly better than not having any options. And I'm liking this. Right, that splotch is a little too big. Let's fix that. Alright, I like that. See, I suppose I'm just an abstract kind of person. We'll put this down. Alright, it is 11:40, so we have 20 minutes left of the Gelli Plate before I switch over to doing some string art for you guys. So if there's anything else you'd like to see about Gelli Plates in particular, go ahead and type in the comments area. And we'll make sure to give it a try and show you how it works. I am happy that my phone is held out. This is a fairly old phone and I do have it plugged in, but even so I could easily drain faster than the plug is plugging it, so I'm glad that it has lasted this long. That is neat. Now see, some of you guys may be saying I like the flower better than this purple splotchy thing, but I really like that purple splotchy thing. What do I like about it? I like the textures. If I turn it, hopefully you can see all the little wiggly lines it created from the paint's thickness as it pulled up and stretched off the Gelli Plate. I like the patterns of the purple and blue and little bits of green in there. So I like all of those intermingling colors. I like the light versus dark areas. Sort of like it's a planet or something. Planet with things going on. There's swirling clouds and moving shapes, and it's got dimension to it. So that makes me very happy. I like that a lot. So then the question becomes, first, where can I put this? I suppose we'll leave the flower since I'm reasonably fond of the flower. That over there. Put that over there. So now, can I just make another one? And again, as I've said before, it will never be an exact duplicate because we've lifted up some paint in this process. But it'll be related to that previous one that we did. Alright, let's see what this does. Intriguing. So if I look at this one compared with the previous one that we did, I like the previous one better because of the more solid paint cover. And I like the white splotchiness of the previous one. So I missed that in this. This one has empty spots where the paint has dried or been completely taken off, but it doesn't have those white spots. And while this is nice, this is telling me that I like adding the white spots, and I suppose I like the white spots in here too, so maybe there's just something about having white ethereal random spots on the picture which appeals to me. So what if I put this down, hopefully that bottom layer is dry now. Alright, so purple, where'd my purple go? That's black. Oh wait, no, that's purple. Alright. Some purple. Alright, get the sponge. Get the hair out of there. So you guys are free to chime in with comments about things you'd like me to try or ideas for other things. Or if you're happy just watching, then that's fine too. There's no stress. This is a relaxing Saturday. We're just exploring creativity. We have no idea how things will come out, and that's okay. The very act of making any sort of art should hopefully be a stress-reducing, health-bringing one. So the more that you can release expectations and just be content with the process, the better it is for everything. If you sat there being grumpy saying, oh, that flower was wrong or the leaves were wrong, that would add stress. The last thing any of us need right now is to add stress into our lives. So it's much better just to relax, take a deep breath saying, I'm just going to have some fun. And that's alright, because we need to be able to unwind and enjoy every day. We're fortunate to have the things we have. See, I even just like looking at that. I don't know if it's the combination of the colors. Maybe it needs a little blue in there. My blue seems to be drying up. Oh, where'd I put the blue? Oh, you're an owl. I have green. Are you blue? Alright, found the blue. Try to do this without getting that all over my clothing. There we go. A little blue. Blue, that one loses. You don't need brushes, you can just use little sponge bits. We've got sponge bits. Oh, I'm liking these little blue dots. Oh, see, look, this is making me happy. Use whatever colors you like, whatever shapes you like, and just relax. It will be what it will be. And that will be okay. And the beauty of this is you can do it with all age groups, all levels of skill. Everyone can have fun doing it. Right, what am I looking for? Some paper. Oh, I like that piece. Alright, we're going to go with a brightish yellowish kind of piece of paper this time. see how this comes out. Interesting. That almost looks like some sort of a flower field with the little flowers all coming up. Is it different this way? Well, it still looks like a flower field to me. I'm liking this one a lot. So where I liked this one, because of it was all speckled and everything, I'm liking this one. And I think I like the blue in there too. This one was just purple and white. This one's got the blue bits. And the purple just seems, maybe because it's wet right now, seems a little more vibrant. But maybe that's because it's showing up against the blue, oops, sorry, against the blue and the white. So I'm liking that a lot. So now I wonder, put the heart over there. Wonder if we do a second one, what we will get. Nobody knows. Well, we probably can guess that it'll involve the color purple and involve the color white and blue. But other than that, let's find out. So now the flower effect is fading. It's still there, but it's definitely much different than this one that we just did. So you can see how just that sequence has made an impact on the picture that we've gotten. And you can see where they've got the same, there's a white splotch over there and a white splotch over there, and there's a hair stuck. All right, got the hair out. And the white splotch there matches the white splotch there. But you can see how much it's changed even between those two poles. And we didn't do anything at all to the Gelli plate in terms of painting it or touching it. We just pulled one image off of it and then pulled the second image off of it. So I still like that one a lot. I'm less fond of this one, but yeah, that's okay. That's the way things go. All right, you're gonna stay. What if we tuck that under there? And there we go. And we'll move these guys and put that over there. Alrighty, where can we put these? I'm running low on places to put my previously done ones. Alright, so now if we pulled again, I think we're getting to the point where it would just be mostly purple, which could be interesting, but I would rather have a little bit of color. So we've got some white over here still. And also this is drying, so now we'll get some interesting, alright, I'm not fond of lines apparently. So we're going to put more splotches. But see, somehow I always end up getting them in a straight line. I don't want a grid. Well, maybe I should just go with the grid. I already got this grid thing going on. For some reason, when I put things down, I naturally put them in grid shapes. This will be like my carbon copies image, which is in the gallery right now, which is closed, of course. But I did a carbon copy version of a Georgia O'Keeffe watercolor. And it was the night sky with a blue, dark blue background and then a grid of stars just like this. So that's how she saw the night sky. Alright, that's interesting. And now I seem to want to add some little blue dots in there, so we'll just add the blue dots. If you get inspired to try something, you might as well try it. Could work, could not work. It's all a learning experience. I'm liking that. How about that? No, wait. Let me paint on my fingers, which is not too surprising given what is going on here. Hey Karina, good to see you. We're doing jelly prints. So this is this one here. Press down to get the paint. Alright, now where in the world did that white splotch come from? I had all sorts of little grids, I swear. I suppose I could go backwards and look at the video. But it goes to show that you never quite control what's going on. But with that being said, that actually looks really cool. And it's interesting that in my mind, here I'll try to show you both of these at the same time. Or here, I suppose we can move the flowers. So I could put that down next to it. There we go. So in my mind, I thought that I had big white dots everywhere, like the stars. And then I had, sorry, I'm just trying to find a spot to put this other flower in my hand. There we go. Alright, so I thought I had big white spots in a grid for the stars, and that I had little tiny blue spots in between, just as accent pieces. But when it came out, I ended up with this giant white splotch, and then big blue splotches, and then smaller white spots. So it shows that even if you have something that you think you're doing, you never quite know how the end result's going to come out. So that's pretty close to what the paint ended up doing on the page. And that's actually sort of intriguing. And now it looks to me like an underwater scene with fish swimming around and maybe like a piece of coral down here against a turquoise sea. And I really like the different textures. You guys know I'm a texture person. And the shading of light and dark. And I like how I had gridded it originally, even though I hadn't wanted it gridded. But for whatever reason, when I squished it down, it no longer looks like a grid. It just looks like a random mix of some jellyfish things and some fish things and some other floating things. It ended up looking very organic, which is quite intriguing to me. What if we hold it that way? Well, it sort of works that way too. Well, not that way. Yeah, so I like that piece a lot, and it seems very underwatery to me. But it's wholly different than I thought it was going to be. So it shows that when you make something, when you design something on your jelly plate, it isn't necessarily going to come out that way necessarily. And that's part of the fun of this, is seeing what happens and being okay with accepting whatever happens to see if you like the way that it works or it doesn't work. Alright, 11:55. Probably got time for one or two more before I start doing some string art, because I imagine you guys have seen all you need to see about how jelly prints work. But if I was just doing this myself for an afternoon, you could see how I could just keep going and saying, oh, well, that's cool, and, you know, heck, well, in here, why don't I do another one to see what happens to it? But then you start to think, well, what if I add some gold? I don't have gold with me, but normally I really like adding gold into these kinds of things because of the pop that it gives to the image. Or, you know, silver or copper or those kinds of colors. But if you're more of a natural color kind of person, natural being like browns and oranges and yellows, you could do a whole series with browns and oranges and yellows. And if you like straight lines, then you could do a whole series with straight lines. It is all up to the style that you like. Alright, so now we've got this one. And look at how different those two are, even though I just took them from the exact same piece with the exact same starting point. So you can see down here it had the white shape, and over here it's got the white shape. So you can see, and like there's the and then the white edge over there. So you can see how they're related to each other. But just where we took that pause to talk a little bit before I did this one made such an enormous difference in how this one came out. And now we've got these spots that dried, so they didn't pick up any paint. and we'd pulled up most of the white, so we're down to this cool, I don't know if you can see it, the sort of bubbly effect, where we've got on the edges of each cell and then the white showing through the middle, so it gives it a very neat textured kind of effect. Let's see if I can hold it to show that to you. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that I really like about this. And if you tried to paint this, like with a paintbrush and paint directly on the paper, it would be, excuse me, reasonably hard to try to get all those little lines in there, all those little details. But when you're doing it with a jelly print, it all just happens naturally by itself. So you end up with this result that looks like it could have taken you weeks to paint it, to paint all those little details in there, but actually, 5 seconds to peel it up off of there. And on one hand, it only took 5 seconds to do this one, but on the other hand, you can see all the previous ones that all led towards this point. Uh-oh, is my phone having trouble? No, my phone seems fine. Yeah, just hiccup for a minute. So anyway, I was just saying that this took only 5 seconds to make, but that it's the end result of all of this other stuff that came before as we were trying different things and trying different colors and combinations. And you can see little hints of the previous runs on the underlayer of this one, so they all relate to each other. This one relates to that one relates to that one, and they all relate back in time to the other previous ones that we did. So I like this one a lot, but I like that one a lot for different reasons. So yeah, so each one ends up creating its own beauty. Alright, well we are now at 12 noon. So if anyone has any questions about the Gelli Plate process, go ahead and type them in the comments area, and I am happy to answer them. I will recap for you what we've been talking about here are Gelli Plate printing. We've been working with, where'd my other one go? Was it under these layers? Yes, it's under layers. Ah, that's all right. So we're working with jelly plates, which are in essence preformed shapes of gelatin. They are squishy, but it's not important that they're squishy. We're not carving into these at all or pressing down into them at all. The reason that we care that it helps keep the paint wet longer, so that it doesn't dry quickly, so that we have a chance to sit here and do stuff on the jelly plate and then make our print before the paint all dries, because once it dries, like this stuff here is dry, it no longer transfers to the paper. So the sole function of this thing we're painting on is to be something that's reasonably, we'll call it moist, I suppose, but something that will help the paint stay wet for longer. So a lot of people paint on gelatin because it helps the paint stay wet. But you can also paint on a piece of plastic or a piece of glass or something like that. You just don't want to paint on paper because the paper will absorb the paint and get it to dry quickly. And then you won't have a chance to be able to press your piece of paper down onto it to do the transfer that you want. And other than that, you use acrylic paint, which is inexpensive and can be found at job lots and Walmarts and all sorts of other places inexpensively. You can just get red, blue, and yellow and mix your own greens and other things, so you don't even need a lot of different paint colors. And you can use old sponges and stuff to paint with, so you don't even need brushes. You just somehow get your paint down onto your surface, get it into a reasonable shape that you want to make a print of, and then you press your piece of paper down onto it to create the print. And that's all there is to it. And then at some point at the end, you wash it up if you want to get the paint off of that.
So let me know if you have any questions about any of this. I'm happy to help, and I hope you enjoy your world of jelly printmaking.